Welcome everybody to On Point Talk, the Carlette Christmas show. This morning, we're talking about a love story. You know, we see love stories all the time in Hollywood, but we're talking about a real live love story. We thought it fitting that we would talk to one woman who has given her life to Christ, who has ministered and ministers to many, she and her husband. And this is a story of love, hope, and faith. Our guest this morning is Cyd Texada. She joins us all the way from Colleyville, Texas, and she is the wife of Ricky Texada, the late Ricky Texada. Many of you know him from the Bayou, and Cyd is an Opelousas. She's from Opelousas, Louisiana, and she joins us to talk about their journey and her faith as she continues this walk. Cyd, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Carlette. Thank you.
Thank you for doing this, and thank you for being who you are.
Thank you.
Before we talk about the whole bigness of the journey, tell us about yours and Ricky's love story.
Well, my husband was truly a remarkable man. He was the love of my life, and we were married 23 and a quarter years, had 2 boys. He was an awesome husband, an awesome father, pastor, friend, teacher, and he was my best friend.
When did you know that this was going to be the love of your life? When did you know?
Well, when we met, I had been working in the corporate environment, and I had been praying that God would send me the person that he wanted for me, no matter what. And when I first met Ricky, you know, I just loved talking to him. You know, when we were away from one another, I just looked forward to just, you know, having a conversation. And it wasn't so much the physical. You look at somebody, oh, wow, he is, you know, whatever.
Because he's good looking.
He's good looking, but it wasn't that. It was missing just that connection with him and spiritual connection, because I knew whatever man I would marry, I just needed someone who loved God with all of his heart, and it would be the spiritual head of our family. And so he was the one that figured it out first. When we started to talk, we knew each other back in college, but at that time he was already dating someone. I never looked at him that way. So I had no clue that God would bring us together. But he shared his story. He shared his story with you about losing his first wife, Deborah, to a car accident and with a drunk driver, and just how God brought us together, used another pastor to introduce us.
So kind of already, you knew
we knew
he was.
of each other, but we hadn't seen each other in years. And I knew when Deborah had passed away, I'd heard, you know, for some friends, some mutual friends told me about the car accident, about her passing away. And I didn't know him well enough to even try to reach out to him. I knew he was in the Metroplex area, but I never tried to contact him. And so I was ministering at this church. I was singing, leading worship, and there was a guest speaker, and he was there, and he said, I said, you go to Covenant Church? And he goes, yeah, I do attend Covenant Church. And he goes, I said, you know Ricky Texada? And he goes, yes. I said, oh, I heard that he had gotten in a car accident. He lost his wife and children. He goes, oh, no, there were no children. He goes, but he did lose his wife. And so I said, oh, well, just offer my condolences to him. And that was like a while after. But he goes off, and he just got it in his mind that, oh my gosh, it's like a light bulb, I think, went off in his head. And God had used him to introduce other people before, and he just believed that something was going on. So he went off talking to Ricky and had Ricky to, he said, I met this girl, and her name is Cyd. And I think you've met her before. He said, but I believe God is doing something there. You need to call her. But Ricky wasn't interested in doing that because he was just walking through that season of grief. And I think he was actually doing a fast at that time. And he wasn't thinking about that. And so it was about, Keith had told me, you know, I'm going to have Ricky call you. And I said, no, please don't do that. I just offer my condolences. But after a few weeks and he hadn't called, even though I wasn't interested in that, I was thinking,
like, he didn't even call.
I don't know why he didn't even call, you know. But one day he called, and normally it's a night I'm not home because I would have choir rehearsal and I was at church. And so he called. It was a stormy night, And so they had canceled practice. I think it was ice on the roads and all that. And usually they wouldn't cancel practice even for that, but they had. So I was there. So I said it was a divine appointment. And we just had a conversation on the phone, and we might have talked for 2 hours, I don't know. But he talked about meeting for dinner, and I was thinking, oh, no, I don't think I want to do that in case. He said, how about if I come pick you up and we go to this restaurant? Because I said, let's meet at this restaurant in Arlington. And he says, how about I pick you up? And I thought, no, in case he was kind of boring in person and I didn't want to be in the car with him there. So I said, no, I'll meet you there. So we met there. We sat there and talked. It might have been for hours.
Wow.
And I just enjoyed the conversation. And honestly, when I first met him, I think he had just gotten off of a fast, so he had lost a lot of weight, and he just looked, to me, a little haggard, maybe you would say, and his clothes not quite fitting right because he had lost all that weight. So it wasn't a physical attraction thing at all, but we just connected, just emotionally, I guess. Just he was a great conversationalist.
Sure.
You know, he was just a funny person and just fun. And we just had a really good time. And
so were y'all connected from that moment on?
From that moment on, I think we didn't realize it, but we just, each day he would call me. And then he said, you know what, I'm going to go out of town a few days. He was going to visit his sister, Jackie. And so he said, how about if we just not talk for a few days? And I said, that would be a great idea. And just give each other space, a little break. And I had never called him. He always called me. So when he went to visit Jackie, we didn't talk for about 3 days, and I just couldn't stand it. And I wanted to talk to him, so I called him for the first time while he was in North Carolina visiting his sister. And she said, who is that? What girl? You know, because all they knew was his wife, Deborah. You didn't tell us you were talking to anybody. He goes, well, she's just a friend. And but we talked then, and it was just, I think I rode with him to Louisiana. I had a trip coming up. It was Christmas time. And he said, you want to ride with me? Since I'm from Opelousas, he's from Alexandria. And I said, sure. And just on that trip home, just God did something. He did something. And it got to a point where I couldn't imagine my life without him. And we were actually talking about potentially, if we got married, on this trip, when would we, when could we get married? When is a good time? And we just were talking about that on the trip. Because he actually said he had a dream or something. And so he, on this trip going home, knew that I was the one. But I was still kind of, God, I need you to show me. And I thought this trip would be very key going home. But I just had a sense of belonging just in our conversation. I don't know. I couldn't imagine life without him.
Now, your life, though, before you marry him and you become a pastor, before you become pastors, your life was very different from being not only a pastor, but a pastor's wife.
Right, it was. I was an engineer for Lockheed Martin at that time. So worked on the F-16 aircraft and incorporating weapons onto the F-16. That's what I did. I was very active in my church. But I must say that before I graduated, a few weeks before graduation from college, I felt like God spoke to me that I would be in full-time ministry. And throughout the years, I had a feeling it had to do with whatever man I would marry. But I had no clue who he could possibly be. And, so at that time when Ricky and I met, it just was so natural. Once we felt like God had brought us together, I thought, okay, well, this is it. Because someone actually spoke to me prophetically during that season when I was an engineer I was at a church service, and I was standing on the front row, and this pastor was speaking, and he called me out and actually said, you're going to marry a powerful man of God. And so in my mind, I'm thinking about all these potentials, who it could be. At that time, we're thinking of Carmen, Carlton Pearson, these powerful men of God. Who's this powerful man of God? But my husband's name, Ricky, or it wasn't Richard, but it's a form of Richard. But Ricky means rich and powerful ruler.
Wow.
So that was so interesting later.
Wow.
That the man that used those words, you're going to marry a powerful man of God.
Wow.
And he was. His name meant that, and he was a powerful man of God.
So was there any reservation about giving up the power that you had in
As
the
an engineer?
corporate world? Yeah.
Because of that that knowing in my spirit from before I graduated from college, and then the prophetic word that I was given, I think I always knew at some point that I might be transitioning out of the corporate world, but I didn't know it would be as long as it was. It was a little over 10 years. Mm-hmm. I thought it would have happened before then. So I didn't have as much because I felt like, okay, this must be it. And Ricky wanted me to work full time with him in ministry. Now I was thinking, okay, so not still working engineering. He goes, no, I want you by my side working in full time ministry. I guess I thought I would do both, but God just gave me I knew this was it. And I was willing to walk away. And I remember my boss said, when I told her, she said, she says, are you sure about this? I said, yes. I said, I'm sure. She says, well, you can always come back. And I said, but I'm not coming back. Wow. I just knew that I wasn't. Then I thought later, why did you say that? Why did you close that door of opportunity? Mm-hmm. But I knew that this was it. And so it was completely different being a pastor's wife, and then kind of an introvert, and I'm a contemplator. I didn't really want to be, I led worship in church, but I just constant interaction with people, and my husband would close the church down, and he would always have a line of people to talk to him. He was encouraging somebody, and I remember when we first got married, I would kind of be, honey, okay, I'm like, okay, it's time to go. And then he would say later, honey, you said you knew you were gonna marry a pastor, and you knew that you were gonna be in full-time ministry. He said, well, here we are. And I had to think about that, and I was like, oh, Lord, because I'd be praying, Lord, help him to understand it's time for us to go. And the Lord dealt with me. It's like, you felt called to this. Mm-hmm. And so you need to be a pastor. And so the Holy Spirit, as I'm praying about my husband, he corrected me and just, hey, this is what I've called you to. And so I just started to, it was uncomfortable for me. Mm-hmm. But I realized, too, that a lot of times when God calls us, it's not to be comfortable. Because if you're comfortable, you don't have to rely on his strength. Right. You can just rely on what you think is your talent and ability. But of course, he's given us that too as well. Right. But I had to rely on God's strength to just allow myself to connect with other people, stop thinking about myself. And I was closing the church down with him, praying for people, encouraging people. I had people come to me and say, remember one time you said this to me, or you prayed this with me when you and Pastor Ricky were here or there. But it just became, I just enjoyed what we were doing, touching people's lives, just one by one.
Let me get a break here, but when we come back, we'll have more of Cyd Texada's powerful story of love, hope, but even bigger than those two things, as big as they are, her faith. Stay on point. We're back after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Pastor Cyd Texada. She is the wife of Ricky Texada. Many of you know his family. His dad, Robert Texada, went home to be with the Lord, but his mom is still alive and very well, Dorothy Texada. And Cyd is a native Louisianian from Opelousas. And, we just thought that it was great to share their love story, because oftentimes in our community, in the Black community, we don't see those love stories other than maybe sometimes on television. And it's happening in real life, in modern day. And we just wanted to share those connections, but also how faith is woven into that love, and hearing you guys' story and your willingness to say yes to God, and to come out of, because oftentimes we're defined as women, and maybe men too, but we're defined by what we do.
Yes.
And now you lay that down to go into full-time ministry. Talk about that journey and, the evolution of being sort of an introvert and then having to come out of yourself.
Oh, my. Well, I think it was just not focusing on me and just really leaning into the Lord. I like to call it a lean into Him. And I mean, because that was really difficult to walk away from a career, walk away from friends. And I mean, I still had the friends, but just in my church family and all those changes, move to a new location, a new city, that's stressful on a person.
Did people say, "What are you thinking?"
Oh yeah. My dad asked me at the time, "Are you sure about walking away from your career?" And different engineer friends would ask me, "Are you sure about this, Cyd?" And it's a step of faith. I mean, really in life, you have to be willing to step out in faith. And I had to step out on what I believed that God had called me to do. And I spoke about leaning in, just leaning into Him. And there's different ways you lean into Him is through prayer. And that's simply conversation with God and just praying, God, give me your peace and just speak to me. Give me your wisdom, your discernment, your direction. Then it's worshiping Him. And when you worship Him, you're acknowledging His Lordship in your life and standing on His word and just the faith.
Did you have that relationship that you talk about now? Did you have that early on? Did you have that before Ricky?
With the Lord? Oh, yeah. I had that with the Lord. And that's why part of my prayer was, God, I'd rather stay single, I said, than marry the wrong person. And that was a big prayer for me because I was hitting 33 and had been believing God for the right person. And so I just knew that I couldn't live my life with someone that wasn't a strong man of God and pursuing serving God and loving Him. So no, I had a strong faith, but I grew in a lot of ways. My husband, because I was more introvert and he was Mr. Personality. Listen, wherever there was more people, he wanted to go. We would be done with 3 services on a Sunday when we had 3 services. And he would say, you want to go over to Keith's house, his brother, or Reggie's house? And I'm thinking, honey, I just want to go home. I have people overload. I just want to go home. But he just knew how to draw me out of myself and out of my shell. And we would go to events we were invited to, and he's Mr. Personality. I could hide behind him and I could just laugh at his jokes or just, insert a little bit here or there. But he helped me to grow in just my interaction with people and being able to allow God to use me and one-on-one and just in group settings and also in front of speaking in front of a congregation and a group of people, because we would host services, I'd have to stand with him. And so I grew a lot in learning to pastor with him and standing before people and communicating. So I had the relationship with the Lord, but I grew in the ministry and the calling that God had for me.
And that love that we saw, anybody who knew you all or who were under you all's leadership knew that he had this deep, deep love for Cyd.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was just really authentic.
It was.
Talk about how that translated to others, because I said, like at the top of this segment, sometimes in the Black community, we've loved the Obamas and we've loved even, the Cosbys, that idealism of what love is. But what we saw in those people who had the opportunity to see the love that you guys had, how did that translate to others who wished for that?
Yeah. Well, I would tell my husband, he would always talk about me in a message. He would mention my name or say something about me. I said, honey, you've got to quit talking about me so much. And I said that in front of some people. They said, no, the women said, no, we want him to do that because he's teaching our husbands, how to value us. But he was very authentic. As you said, he was a real deal. He was not fake. He was very deliberate in everything that he did. And I just think the men always said, you know what? I am not who I need to be as a man of God. They looked up to him. They respected him. And there's plenty of people said Pastor Ricky saved our marriage because he would encourage men about learning how to love their wives and being the head of their homes. Because, women, we have lots of retreats. We have activities. It's easy for us to express our feelings. But men, it's different. And so he saw the importance of mentoring. He always had a group of men, and sometimes the wives wanted to be a part of that too. But he always had people that he was mentoring and just sharing with them. And a lot of people we mentored through just them watching us. They watched the way we interact with each other and how we, how we communicated and how we did ministry, how we did life
and how
together.
you loved each other.
How we loved each other.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me get a break here, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the way that life's twists and turns happen. And when they happen, are we fortified in our faith to stand the test of time? Stay with us. We're back with more of this conversation right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to On Point Talk, the Carlette Christmas Show. Our guest this morning is Cyd Texada, and she and her husband ministered together for many, many years, 2+ decades, and then life happened. And this morning we're talking about that unwavering love that two people have, not only for each other, but for God. And when that ends suddenly and unexpectedly, like it did for literally millions of people during the COVID-19 pandemic, what do you do? And Cyd, so you guys are on an incredible journey. You have your babies, you have your boys.
Yes.
They're growing, they're successful, they're handsome.
Thank you.
And then, life happens. And so we all experienced the pandemic.
Yes.
It was no surprise to God, but it was a surprise to many.
Right.
And so was there ever a time where you felt like an event was going to happen, something was going to happen that would change you guys' lives?
No, I don't. We had no clue. It seems like everything was going great. There's some things that we were doing at the house together, and we had no clue. Then my husband was diagnosed with COVID.
He just got sick.
He just got sick. He had gone to a men's event, and I think someone came there that had COVID. And he was healthy and strong. My husband was the healthiest person in the household.
Did anybody else get COVID?
I did. First it was him, and then within days later, I did. And I wasn't doing really well. And then my oldest son as well. I tried to keep him away. And he just said, "Oh, I'm not concerned about that." And he got sick. And he was someone who struggled with asthma. So, but my youngest didn't. My husband kind of kept him at bay and then even put him in a hotel. And that's where he was.
So were you guys worried when, pretty much everybody in the house, other than your baby, gets sick? Or your young man gets sick? We
were concerned. And I had an elderly mother who lived with us. I had to take care of her and always fix her food. And by the grace of God, she never got sick, and I was able to still kind of do what I needed to do for her. And so it was crazy, and I never would have thought. He had a really bad cough with it, and for a while before finally his oxygen levels were, struggling with that, and we felt like he needed to go to the emergency room. And that's the only reason we thought, okay, you should go to the hospital, because we couldn't get, that cough was just so persistent, no matter what he did.
But you're still feeling like...
But still feeling, we're going to get through this. This is, never would have thought anything. We're all not doing well right now, but we're gonna get through it. There was just no hint of anything.
When does it turn?
Well, when he went to the hospital, to the emergency room to get his oxygen checked. And while he was there, whatever they saw or what have you, they just felt like they needed to admit him. And I was not happy about that, because everybody always said, don't go to the hospital, whatever you do. I mean, I was just thinking, we're not going to go to the hospital. We're going to do everything we can not to go to the hospital. But because of that cough and his oxygen levels, we did. And when they said they had to admit him, I was not happy about it, but okay, this is the next step of the process. Still, everything's going to be all right. He's going to be okay. And even in this time, he had sent me like a little video of himself. He had to be careful about talking too much, just about the coughing. They started the COVID protocol, is what the hospital called, putting him on the different medications, and a certain different medications for COVID. And so they started all that with him. But he had sent me a video, and he had had a dream while he was in the hospital. And he said, honey, he said, I had this dream. He said, we just got to keep standing firm, and this is going to be a tough one, but we got to believe God. He said, and God showed me that he's going to give me a new body. So I'm thinking, oh, God's going to give him a new lung, he's going to raise him up, he's going to be fine. And he even told me one of the other pastors in our church had sent him a text and said, Pastor Ricky, I had a dream about you. And in that dream, you were younger, but you were standing on stage and you were speaking, and God was moving powerfully. People were getting healed and delivered. It was just amazing things that were happening in this dream. So he had that dream, and then the dream that God says, I'm going to give you a new body. And so that just increased our faith.
Right.
And, we always get a picture of how we think God's going to do something, right? And so I did. I had this picture of how God was going to do things, and perhaps he was as well. And, just things turned out differently.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm sure there is a time when you know that he's not going to get that new body on this side.
Let me tell you, I'm a fighter. And then I was just willing to believe. I still had a lot of faith. Mm-hmm. Someone had to talk to me. Actually, they had to talk to me to kind of like, okay. But I just had a lot of faith, and I was still believing God even when he ended up getting a massive stroke. Mm-hmm. Because of the medication and because of the, just everything he was going mm-hmm. through. He had this massive stroke, and the day after he had sent me that note, then he can't even communicate. Even in that state, I was still believing God was going to raise him up. God's going to give him a new body.
Right.
And I was standing, and we had people praying all over the world. I mean, our church that sent that out. Mm-hmm. I mean, over social media and right. all over the world, people were standing and praying with us. No matter what the doctor would say to me, I still was believing God.
Right.
And even as things were turning, because they had him on the ventilator or
right.
whatever,
mm-hmm.
and all of that, I still believed that God was going to raise him up. And the doctor was trying to get me to turn things, trying to tell me that, look, things are worse than you think and whatever, but I still had faith. And I did not like, what they
right.
were saying. I was still standing and believing.
Believing God's report.
Believing God's report until, I went to the hospital this one morning. They called and said, you need to come. You need to come now. Because I hadn't gotten there yet. And so even there, I was still believing. And then they had someone come to me and say, you need to go in, you and your sons, and you need to release him. And I'm thinking, I don't know how to do that. My pastors were there, the founding pastor, and then the one, our lead pastor now, Pastor Amy, and just a lot of our leadership, they were all there at the hospital. And I said, I don't know how to go and release him. I still have faith. I want God to raise him up.
Right.
And they were, and the person said, no, if you could just go in and just let him know you're going to be okay and release him. And we need the kids to do the same thing.
What are the kids saying at that moment?
I mean, they were still hoping and standing in faith too. My kids, they were Cyd Texada's sons.
Right.
And they had a lot of faith, and we were still, they couldn't stand to see their dad that way, because their dad was so strong, right. and larger than life. And he just...
But when you see him...
And even seeing him in that bed and the way he looked, it wasn't the Ricky that I know and that I knew. But still, I was standing and believing. But I went in that room. They would only let us go in one at a time.
Wow.
And he was in the ICU and COVID ICU, even separate from everyone else. And really for the longest, because I had COVID and Seth had COVID, they wouldn't even let anyone see him. We couldn't even see him. So just the thought, he went through all of that alone without his family. And I had to beg to get in there to see him. Once I felt like I was past it and I was doing all right, and I wasn't contagious anymore, I said, well, I want to see my husband. This so many days have passed, and I had to really be forceful about it. Mm-hmm. And then the doctors finally decided, well, I guess it's okay, mm-hmm. to let us go see him. But through that whole time, I just felt terrible that we weren't there to stand with him through it all. Mm-hmm. He was alone without family in there. But anyway, so I went in and I said to him, honey, I love you, and I still, we're not done. I would like to have more time together, but if you want to go home and be with the Lord, then I release you. If you choose to do this, mm-hmm. Then I release him. That was the hardest thing, because I thought, okay, but if he's going to fight, But I'm letting them know, if you want to go home with the Lord, we're going to be okay because we're going to trust God. I didn't feel that. I was speaking words of faith at that moment.
Right.
And so my kids basically did the same thing. Dad, we love you and we want you to come back. But if you want to go home to be with the Lord, then we understand. And after that, when we did that, everything just went downhill. So, hearing, they always said hearing is the last thing to go.
Right.
So no matter what state he was in, he heard us. And so he transitioned. And let me tell you, I let out just this scream. It was just a roar. I've never heard anything like that before, because I was believing God he was going to come out of there. And so that was the hardest thing in my whole life. I was crushed. My children were crushed, but we had so many people around us that were there to support us. And it seemed unbelievable then. And I'm going to tell you, Carlette, still now, it still seems unbelievable that he's gone, because I still get stories of people sharing how much he changed their lives, how much he impacted them still now. And so, he was just, he was intense, but in a good way. And he was intense in doing God's will. Mm-hmm. And like I said, very deliberate everywhere he went, the grocery store, the drive-through of Brahms or McDonald's. Everybody knew him, loved him, because wherever he was going to touch somebody's life. The gas station, he was going to give somebody a word. And my boys sometimes sitting in the back seat, and he would be talking to the person, encouraging them. And as they were growing up, teenagers, they would be like, Dad, kind of sinking in their chair like, Dad, embarrassed.
Do we have to do it today?
But as they grew up, they understood this is just who my dad is. So I'm just going to go with the flow. We go to the grocery store. I'm like, honey, I'm going to go on and get the grocery. And if you want to visit, you see someone you go ahead, but I just need to go on and get that grocery.
Right.
It was just who he was and is, because he's still alive in eternity right now. And there's something, God wanted to bring him home. He was done with his assignment on this side, but there's something he's doing up in heaven. I just know it,
He's encouraging people in heaven.
Men or something. I've had some people that had dreams of him in heaven, and these men around him. So we don't really have a view of what heaven is. We don't know everything. Mm-hmm. I know that when you're in God's presence, that's the only thing that gives me peace. Is while I'm sad for us, he is in the presence of God, where there's no more longing. Ooh. Longing cease. He's got everything he wanted that he didn't even know he wanted and needed. And there's nothing else he desires. I know he loves us, but he's not thinking about what are they doing today? What are they?
Right.
He is so fulfilled. Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing that gives me peace. It's like, my husband deserved this. This man lived his life on purpose every single day, every moment. And he deserves to be completely at peace with God.
When you really come to the realization that his assignment is complete, do you say, God, why?
Oh, I still, in my humanity, I'm still like,
yes.
Lord, I don't like the fact that you took him away from us, God, but I don't understand why, because he was doing so much good. We had been pastors for years, and then he had transitioned. He functioned in the position a little over a year as the senior pastor of the church. So he was doing so much good and reaching so many people all around the world. So many people respected him. But, God sees a bigger picture. Mm-hmm. And so his assignment, he always pointed people to Jesus. Mm-hmm. His assignment was complete. And so now we who remain, we have to understand that, okay, I'm still here. I'm still alive and well on this side of eternity. So I had to really get a hold of God. Help me to finish strong the way my husband finished strong. Although I'm not happy with how things turned out, I choose to trust you. I choose to trust you, Lord. Wow. You chose him for me. You chose us for one another. And I thought we would grow old together. That's what we believed. And so I had to still choose to trust God, even though things didn't turn out the way I expected.
Did it surprise you? And probably not even surprise you, but were you in awe at how many people, famous people and ordinary people, that he touched on that glorious day when you guys celebrated his life?
When I saw all the people that were there, even for the viewing, I mean, they were just wrapped around. There was line wrapped around, and it was like 3 hours or so to just get through, people coming through there. And then the place was full, and then there was thousands, I understand, like just watch parties from all over
the world.
I thought, my gosh, my husband was always reaching out to people. And I guess I was surprised in some ways, but it was fitting because he lived his life just for the Lord and reaching others, that I was just so grateful that so many people loved him and just saw the impact.
And loved you all.
And loved us together, yes, because everyone was so wonderful.
One of the things that struck me is how B.B. Winans sang his face off.
He did. He
And
loved
how
Ricky.
he cried and how he just poured out.
Yeah. They had a great friendship, and Ricky got to really encourage him through, some difficult times. And he had given Ricky his number because Ricky had given him a word at one time that he said, a lot of people call themselves giving me a word, but when you spoke what you spoke to me, I knew that was from God. And so he would come to town and we would go to lunch with him and just connect. And we were friends. We have a great time just laughing, and he was just a fun guy. But he loved my husband and respected him, the person that he was, so much. And so I just knew that I had to ask BB to sing. And I knew he would be shocked too, at Ricky's loss. But I was so honored that he was willing to come. And
so with this incredible journey and God providing the next journey, I'm sure people in our area who knew you guys together are wondering, how are Cyd and the boys? How are you progressing through this season?
Well, it's up and down, and it's been 2.5 years. I might cry one minute, but I might be laughing one minute. It's kind of a roller coaster ride with grief. You never know what to expect, but we are well. We are well. I can still say honestly that God's love never fails. He's helped me. He's helping my boys. My boys are doing well. They were close to their dad, but they are trusting the Lord and serving the Lord. And we encourage one another. We talk about their dad. We talk about funny things about him because he was just, he was always making us laugh. He laughed. He was the life of the party at home and wherever. So
what would he be saying to you now, Cyd? What would he want for you?
Well, he would say, honey, your assignment's not done, and you need to trust God, and you need to not focus on yourself, but keep your eyes fixed on him, so that we can see each other one day. Because my mother-in-law, Ricky's mom, said something to me because, Ricky's dad passed away in October before Ricky passed away in August. And she said, they're in our future. And so he's in our future. And I know he would say, honey, finish your race strong. Finish your race strong. Keep your eyes on the Lord. And that's what I'm trying to teach my boys as well.
Wow. So. Cyd, thank you for being a light in the world.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you
Carlette.
for keeping that light shining bright, because it could have gone a lot of different ways. And we just believe that your story is going to give life and hope to so many more stories, and it's going to grow all of our faith.
Thank you. I hope so.
Indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back to wrap up right after this.